Smoke covered the sky. The base looked like a graveyard. Destroyed vehicles, broken radios, wounded soldiers lying by the walls whispering prayers. Then, a voice cut through the chaos, deep, commanding, desperate. "Any Apache pilots here?" Silence, no one moved. No one spoke, and then a woman stepped forward. She wasn't wearing a flight suit. No badges, no rank. Just grease-stained overalls and a wrench in her hand. Everyone thought she was just a mechanic, quiet, invisible, someone who fixed helicopters, not flew them. But that day, something changed. She looked at the smoking horizon, then at the grounded Apaches. Without a word, she set her wrench down and walked toward one. People stared in disbelief. "She's not a pilot," someone whispered. But the general didn't stop her. There was something in her walk. Calm, confident, certain. She had been at that base for months. Always early. Always focused. No friends, no gossip, no stories. Just work. To the pilots, she was the wrench girl. Someone who fixed their machines while they talked about missions. They never noticed how she studied every switch, every control, like she was remembering something long forgotten. At lunch, she sat in the corner, silent. She didn't mind, because silence was her shield. Her past wasn't in any file. Her training wasn't in any record. She had secrets, ones even the general didn't know, and when the siege began, those secrets woke up, mortar fire rained down. The base shook. Men shouted, ran, fell. While others hid, she stayed in the open, fixing ruptured fuel lines, patching damaged cables, stacking crates into makeshift barriers. Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't flinch. Because chaos was familiar. No one noticed. No one thanked her. But without her, the base would have already fallen. By nightfall, the enemy pulled back. Half the base was gone. Half the pilots, dead or wounded. And when the sun rose again, the general stood before the surviving soldiers and shouted, "Any Apache pilots left?" Silence again, until that same woman stepped forward. She didn't salute. She didn't ask permission. She just walked toward the Apache. Her movements were slow. Sure, like someone returning home, people whispered. "She can't fly that. She's crazy." But the general's eyes narrowed. He'd seen this before, the way a real pilot moves. She climbed into the cockpit. Her fingers brushed the controls, with the confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. The engines roared to life. Dust and debris swirled everywhere. Soldiers shielded their faces, watching the impossible happen. The Apache lifted off the ground, smooth, steady, perfect. And in that moment, the base saw her for who she really was. Not a mechanic, not background, but a warrior who had been hiding in plain sight. The engines screamed to life. The air turned heavy. Dust rose like smoke from the battlefield, and the broken base watched something impossible unfold. That silent mechanic, the one no one looked at twice, was now inside a $35 million Apache attack helicopter. No announcement, no hesitation, just steady hands and eyes that burned with purpose. Soldiers stared, speechless. They had seen pilots before, nervous, sweaty, sometimes scared. But she moved like she belonged there. Every finger twist, every switch she flipped was exact, confident, practiced. The general's heartbeat slowed. He had seen true pilots, and he could recognize one even under grease-stained sleeves. Where did she learn that? Someone whispered. No one answered, because the truth didn't live in her records. It lived in her silence. She reached up, pressed a lever, and the Apache roared. Rotors spun faster, rattling the ground. Soldiers shielded their faces. Sand whipped into their eyes. And right there, the impossible became real. The Apache lifted off. Slow at first, then rising, steady, powerful, alive. Every eye on the base followed her. The woman they ignored yesterday was now the reason they still had hope today. Inside the cockpit, the world melted away. No voices, no panic, just the deep hum of turbine engines and the soft click of switches under her fingers. Her mind went calm, like slipping back into a dream she once lived. Her muscles remembered what her files forgot. She'd trained for this. She'd been this, maybe somewhere in another life, maybe in missions no one was allowed to know about. She checked the systems one by one. Target sensors, weapons control, rotor balance perfect. Outside, the general stood frozen. He didn't stop her, didn't shout orders, Because what he saw wasn't madness. It was mastery. This wasn't a gamble. This was instinct, experience, and something deeper. A warrior stepping out of her disguise. Then the radio crackled. "Command, we have movement in the valley." Enemy regrouping. The general looked toward the horizon. Black smoke rose in the distance. They were coming back. Hundreds of them. He turned, but the Apache was already gone. She had lifted off, vanishing into the morning sky. The enemy fighters on the valley's edge heard it too. The low, thunderous chop of blades. That sound, they knew it. The sound that meant death from above. "Impossible," one of them shouted. "All the Apaches were destroyed." But then the clouds broke, and through the light of dawn they saw her. A lone Apache flying low, cutting through the valley like a shadow with teeth. Inside the cockpit, she whispered, "Let's finish this." Her eyes locked on the target screen, hands steady on the controls. The system beeped. Target acquired. She squeezed the trigger. Whoosh! Rockets streaked out, splitting the sky in lines of fire. The first blast hit an enemy truck. The second, their ammo dump. Then came the chain reaction. Boom! A wall of fire rolled through the ridge. The enemy line broke apart. They scattered like ants under fire. Back at the base, soldiers stared at the horizon. One Apache, one woman, and a valley on fire. The radio came alive. Enemy retreating. They're pulling back. Cheers erupted through the broken camp. Some dropped their weapons and just cried, because they'd seen death coming. And she stopped it alone. The general didn't move. He just watched the sky, and under his breath he whispered, "She's not just a mechanic." Because what he saw wasn't just skill. It was something else. Something you can't teach. Something born from pain, loss, and purpose. And up there in the sky, the woman everyone ignored became what she was always meant to be. A protector. A silent storm. The ghost that carried their survival. The sky was burning. Smoke rose in black columns, and the valley below looked like a wound that refused to close. She flew straight into it. No backup, no co-pilot, no fear. Inside the cockpit, warning lights blinked red. Fuel low, weapons limited. But she didn't flinch. Her voice, calm and steady, came through the radio. "Command, this is Mechanic 01. Engaging hostiles." The general froze. Mechanic 01. He realized what she'd done. She didn't even use a pilot call sign. She used her job title, the same one they mocked her for. Down below, the enemy regrouped fast. Dozens of trucks, hundreds of men, anti-air weapons locking on. To them, she was just one helicopter, a minor threat. They were wrong. She dropped altitude, barely 50 feet from the ground. The Apache sliced through the valley, trees bending under the rotor wash. The radar lit up, 3 enemy launchers targeting her. She moved before they could fire. Hard bank left, countermeasure release. Flare trails lit the sky like falling stars. She weaved through gunfire, bullets sparking across her windshield, each one a whisper of death passing by inches. Inside the cockpit, her breathing stayed slow. She'd done this before, and somewhere, somehow. Her hands didn't tremble. They danced, joystick forward, collective up, laser targeting on, beep, beep, beep. Target locked, she fired. 2 Hellfire missiles cut across the valley. Boom. Enemy launchers turned into flames. A shockwave rattled her teeth, but she kept flying. For every explosion below, a memory flashed behind her eyes. Faces, teammates, a past she couldn't talk about. People she'd lost. People she flew for. At the base, soldiers watched the sky. The radio buzzed with half-belief. She's still up there. Single Apache engaging entire enemy line. She's insane. No. She's winning. The general's voice cracked through comms. Whoever she is, give her airspace, all of it. Let her fight. And she did. She dove again, low enough to feel the shockwave of her own rockets. The ground erupted behind her, enemy vehicles flipping like toys. One by one, their communication lines went silent. Their formation, gone. Their courage broken. To them, she wasn't human. She was a ghost with blades, an unkillable shadow, silent, deadly, relentless. But she wasn't just fighting them. She was fighting the memory of every time she'd been overlooked. Every time someone said, "You're just a mechanic." Every time she'd swallowed her truth to keep her cover safe. Now, she didn't need to hide anymore. Her silence became fire. Her calm became thunder. and for the first time in years she felt alive again. "Mechanic 01 to base," she radioed. "East Ridge clear. Moving to the south." The general's reply came soft, filled with awe. "Copy that, Mechanic. You've done enough," but she didn't stop. She couldn't, because she saw movement. A convoy breaking away from the ridge, loaded with explosives, heading straight for the base. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't over. She banked the Apache hard, racing the convoy through the valley. Her display flashed fuel 8%. Ammo low didn't matter. Not today. She dropped altitude again, trees scraping the underside of her helicopter. The chase felt endless. The convoy zigzagged through the canyons, their gunners firing up at her, desperate. She waited, just for the right angle. Then, beep, target lock. She pressed the trigger. Boom! A rocket hit the lead truck, and the whole convoy erupted in a chain of explosions. Flames rolled through the canyon like a wave of fire. At the base, soldiers cheered. Men who had been ready to die were now shouting her name. The radio filled with voices. She did it. She stopped them. She saved the base. But she didn't reply. Inside the cockpit, she just exhaled slowly, watching the smoke rise from what could have been their final hour. She turned the Apache around. The battlefield behind her glowed orange. Her reflection flickered in the cracked glass. A mechanic's face, tired but steady, and in that silence she whispered, "You're safe now." As she flew back toward the base, the sun broke through the clouds. Light spilled across the wreckage, and for the first time since the siege began, the world felt alive again. At that moment, every soldier understood. She wasn't a hero by title. She was a hero by choice. The battle was over. The valley burned behind her, and the sound of the Apache faded into the quiet of victory. She guided the helicopter back toward the broken base. Every gauge was flashing red, fuel almost gone, system warnings blinking. But her hands stayed steady like they always had. As the helicopter descended, soldiers gathered below, faces covered in dirt, eyes filled with awe. The same people who once ignored her now looked at her like she was something unreal. She hovered above the ground, then lowered the craft gently, touching down so smooth the landing gear barely hissed. The rotors slowed. Dust swirled around her. No one moved. Not a single word was spoken. When the blades stopped turning, the silence was deafening. The canopy opened. She stepped out, helmet under her arm, sweat and soot streaked across her face. No smile, no pride, just quiet. The kind of quiet that speaks louder than words. The general was waiting. He didn't bark orders this time. Didn't ask questions. He just stared at her. The woman who saved them all. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then he stepped aside, clearing a path for her to walk through. It wasn't protocol. It was respect. Real, raw, wordless respect. She walked forward, each step slow. Grounded, calm, and as she passed, soldiers straightened up. Some saluted, others just nodded, and a few wiped their eyes because they knew. They were alive because of her. She didn't stop for applause. Didn't wait for thanks. She just kept walking toward the same hangar she'd always worked in, the same grease-stained floor, the same broken tools, the same silence. She picked up the rag she'd dropped before the battle, wiped her hands and clipped it back onto her belt. Then, quietly, she went back to work. Days later, reports were written, charts, numbers, names. But in the margins of the general's report, one line stood out, handwritten, underlined twice. Mission survival, directly credited to mechanic support staff. Recommend full review of personnel background. He didn't write her name. He didn't need to. Because legends don't need labels. Weeks passed. Her story began to spread, not through official reports, but through whispers. Across bases, across camps, people spoke of the silent mechanic, the one who flew an Apache when everyone else was gone. The one who carried the sky on her shoulders and gave hope back to the hopeless. Some called it a rumor. Some said it was impossible. But those who were there knew the truth. They'd seen her. They'd heard that engine. They'd watched a quiet woman turn silence into salvation. Back in her hangar, she stayed the same. Quiet, steady, invisible again. She never told her story, never corrected the rumors, never asked for medals, because real heroes don't chase glory. They build it in silence. And whenever an Apache started its engines after that day, every soldier nearby paused for just a second. Not to listen to the machine, but to remember her, the woman who fixed what was broken, who fought when no one else could, who reminded them all that titles don't make heroes, courage does, and sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that saves the world.